Hello, friends. Good evening. Welcome to the first monk chat of 2021. I am Ayasoma, for those who don't know. And to my right, there is Bhante Sumano, and to my left, there is Bhante Sudaso. And we're all resident monastics here at Empty Cloud. We also have some other residents who are not currently in the picture due to some problems that we had this morning when all the resident monastics were in the picture. All right, so if you have any questions, well, first of all, if you're live, we see numbers, but we don't see anyone checking in the live chat, so feel free to come and say hello. We'd love to see who's watching. And then if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them in the live chat, and we'll try our best to answer them. Hello, Kausar friend. Good evening to you as well, or actually good night since you're in Europe. So that's about like 2 a.m. or something like that, 1 a.m. And hello to Robin, and hello to Lloyd. Welcome to everyone. So there are no questions just yet, so we can see. Hello, Geeta. Welcome, friend.
This may turn out to be the shortest monk chat ever.
We're very zen monk chat. Welcome to James. Happy New Year to everyone. And muy bonito, Ricardo says, I can't wait to sit with you guys in real life this year. Oh, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'm putting all my wishes out there. Great. May they be true. We look forward to seeing you here. We'll be quite happy to see you. Hopefully things will improve and conditions will be much better. And Geeta says, thank you for making monk chat possible. Well, actually, you make monk chat possible by bringing your questions to the monastics. Then that's how monk chat happens, because we have questions, and then sometimes we can have answers to share. So Kausar friend says, Metta and karuna seem close. I understand one is wishing well-being and the other is wishing an end to suffering. But these seem like two sides of the same coin. What's the difference experientially? Do any of the venerables want to pick this question? Well, or give an answer? Bhante Sumano? Oh, actually, Bhante Sudaso was volunteer.
So, to be perfectly honest, the way I would answer your question is to practice both and see how they feel different. There is a noticeably different feeling between metta and karuna. If I was to put a description to it, though, I would say that metta feels more childlike, somewhat idealistic. Like metta has this sort of blind optimism feel to it. Whereas karuna has a little dose of wisdom, a recognition that life is not all sunshine and roses, that life includes quite a lot of dukkha. So in order to have compassion, karuna, one has to recognize the existence of dukkha. Whereas to have metta, you don't need to recognize the existence of dukkha at all. So it can just be this simple, pure thing of happiness is great. May everyone have happiness. So this very simple, childlike mind state. Whereas compassion, there has to be the recognition that there is dukkha. And dukkha is very unpleasant and uncomfortable. And it's a universal experience, which all beings want to be free of. So compassion incorporates an element of wisdom. So I would say that the 4 Brahmaviharas are progressively incorporating elements of wisdom. So each of the 4 incorporates a bit more wisdom than the previous one. I've also heard it described that the 4 Brahmaviharas are a progression, that they build on the previous one. So metta, wishing for everyone to be happy. Again, this very simple, pure wish. But then as we investigate that more closely, we start asking, well, why are they not happy? Oh, they're not happy because of their suffering. So we wish for them to be free of suffering. But as we look more closely, we also see that beings also experience happiness and good fortune and pleasant things. So we appreciate good fortune. We rejoice in pleasantness. And we recognize that the nature of all samsaric experience is this cycling between pleasure and pain. So naturally, the mind converges on equanimity, recognizing that every being is simply experiencing their own cycles of karma. And whether we wish well for them or not, they'll experience the results of their own choices. So I've also heard it described as a natural progression in that way. But I mean, ultimately, the way you answer this question is by practicing each one and seeing what it feels like. And then you'll know for yourself what the difference in the two is.
Because our friend is also saying, interesting, I have not considered the Brahma Viharas as a progression. That's a good perspective. And Robin says, in the summer, you were chanting the Ratana Sutta as a protection against illness, I think. Some of my friends are sick, and I was wondering, is that something I can do also, or is it only for monks? Sumana?
I'm sorry to hear your friends are sick. But yeah, that's something that anyone can do. And what gives the chant power is the power of your practice. So whoever it is, whether they're a monk or a layperson or whoever, yeah, you can chant.
All right. And Putrika says, good morning, good evening. Putrika has developed many superpowers. So she can be in different places at the same time, where it's both morning and evening. Great. So I don't see any other questions. So I think we have an audience of fully enlightened beings because they don't have any questions because they've done what has to be done.
Or fully exhausted.
Fully exhausted that might be. Kazir friend says, what are your chances for stream entry? Dedicating oneself to this goal, can people generally be expected to attain it? Yes, you can attain it right here, right now. Just like that. Actually, we all can, like that. We can attain full awakening, just like that. One moment. Instant enlightenment, as they say. Yet, so difficult. We're so attached to so many different things. So recognizing that, I really actually like the concept of Buddha nature in the way of, in the Zen tradition, they say that these phrases that can be easily misinterpreted, which is basically, we're already enlightened. But actually what I really like is Suzuki Roshi's quote, you're perfect just the way you are, and you need a little work. But fundamentally, that we have this pure nature. So we have the Buddha nature. Each one of us has Buddha nature, completely enlightened. But it's kind of like, we've created so many habits, horrible habits. We need to somewhat navigate this surface and eliminate it. But the potential is there. So awakening is here and now. So it doesn't really matter. Then the question, it's not really about when it's going to happen or what kind of chances or, it's not really like if I enroll at Columbia University in foreign politics, well, I'm expected to graduate. There's I don't know what percentage there is, 85%. I'm gonna 85% of graduates that make it, and in this amount of time, and I have to dedicate these amount of hours. So it's not really that way. It's rather we just do what needs to be done. And however long it takes, 1 second, 1 instant, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 lifetime, 2 lifetimes, 1 eon. The important thing is that we're committed to the path, we're committed to the work. We do the work and we put the conditions in place, and that's the result. The awakening comes into being. So yeah, just practice. I don't know if the Venerables want to add something else.
Yeah, I'll just give a very short answer. So you ask, what are your chances of stream entry? 100%. If you point yourself towards awakening and you keep moving forward, then your chances are 100%. It might take a while though, but you'll get there.
Okay. And Gita says, we find that when one engages in the 5 senses, we experience suffering. In light of this reality, how can we use wisdom to develop our equanimity? Bhante Sumano?
I think I would say that for me, it's not necessarily engaging in the 5 senses that causes dukkha, but rather clinging to the experience that we have through the 5 senses. And the distinction being that a lot of the suffering, at least that I've encountered, comes up because I try to fight reality. So, something changes, something doesn't stay the way that I want it to, and I get upset. Like, why did this thing have to change? It should have been perfect and nice, just like it was when I first encountered it. And so it changes, and naturally I get upset. Or I try to hold on to something. It's me, mine, myself, it's who I am, whatever it is. And then somebody criticizes me, or something happens, and I'm like, it's painful because that's part of me. That's me. That's vulnerable. That's susceptible to other people's opinions, my opinions, susceptible to falling away. And then sort of expecting that the world will always be our way, that things will always line up just how we want them to. And if we just, line things up perfectly, then we'll have the perfect life. But naturally, they fall apart. Naturally, they get knocked over like a stack of dominoes or a house of cards. And so suffering arises because of this expectation that none of these things will happen. And so for me, wisdom is actually accepting that this is the nature of conditions. This is the nature of building a house of cards. A house of cards is meant to fall. And once we stop fighting that, then we experience equanimity, experience peace. So instead of expecting the body, for example, to always be healthy and fit and pretty, smelling nice, when inevitably we get injured or we get gray hairs, our teeth get cavities, we don't look as nice, people don't appreciate our wrinkles and odors, then we're just like, actually, that's how the body is. That's what the body does. And then it doesn't bother us anymore. But if we get caught up in trying to preserve something that never really was there in the first place, then we're just causing ourselves suffering. No matter how much plastic surgery we get or hair replacement or whatever it is, it still won't make us happy. And it's still going to change anyway. So in some ways, acceptance of these truths brings equanimity, brings peace. And the acceptance of how experience actually is part of seeing things with wisdom.
Thank you, Bhante. And James, hello, James. Happy New Year. Good to see you. James says, how can one contemplate the Four Noble Truths directly? Samyutta Nikaya 56.7 describes abandoning unskillful thoughts to think about the Four Noble Truths instead. And this leads to Nibbana. Curious how that could be done? Thank you. Ante Sudaso?
Well, there's two different things there. So one is thinking about the Four Noble Truths. So that's developing Chintamaya Panya, so the wisdom that comes from thinking about and contemplating things intellectually. And that's useful to a point. So it's not to be skipped over or dismissed. It's very valuable to intellectually ponder the Buddha's teachings. But with the Four Noble Truths, what's really helpful is to notice them. So the Buddha prescribed a practice for each of the Four Noble Truths. So for dukkha, he said, dukkhaṃ pariññeya. So pariññeya means it should be completely understood, fully known. So this means that we should pay attention to the experience of dukkha. So in every moment, ask yourself, where is the dukkha in this moment? What is the dukkha right now? So really turning your mind towards a direct feeling of the dukkha. Not ignoring it or turning away from it, but giving it your full attention, knowing it completely. Then the second one, the cause of dukkha, so that's desire. So once again, noticing the discomfort that is associated with desire, noticing the discomfort that is hand in hand with desire, and making an effort to let go of that desire, to stop fueling it, to stop feeding it. Then when we stop feeding desire, then the corresponding dukkha fades away. So that's the third one, nirodha. And the Buddha said that nirodha is sachikataba. It is to be realized. So that means that we should be paying attention to the moments when dukkha ceases or diminishes, even slightly. And this is actually a really profound practice, the perception of the Third Noble Truth, the perception of the cessation of dukkha. Because it's actually happening all the time. We just normally don't pay any attention to it. We're too caught up in everything else. We miss the fact that every single moment dukkha is ceasing. Isn't that fabulous? And when we start paying attention to the cessation of dukkha that's happening every single moment, then one, the mind becomes joyful, because we realize that the cessation of dukkha is not something that's going to happen in 40 years or 50 years. It's actually happening right now. We experience an increase in faith because we realize that the cessation of dukkha is possible, it's tangible. If we're paying attention, we'll see the causal connection, that the letting go of desire is the direct cause for the cessation of dukkha. And we'll also recognize that as long as we don't produce more dukkha, then the mind will be free of dukkha. So that's very potent as well. And the fourth noble truth is the path. So recognizing that the practices we do help us to fully know dukkha, to let go of the causes of dukkha, and to directly observe the cessation of dukkha. So this is something that can be done immediately in the present moment. So you can do this as a meditation practice, or you can do it as a observation of the mind as you go throughout your day. So trying to directly feel and observe the Four Noble Truths in operation in every moment.
Great. Thank you, Bante. And Cows, our friend, says, in the past, I had a daily meditation practice and felt like it was doing a lot of good. But now it feels like I ran against the wall, like it's scary to look too deeply at what is happening internally. I feel a lot of aversion against sitting meditation to the point where I have a really hard time getting myself to actually do it. This despite knowing I need this to progress. Do you have any advice for what I could do to reignite my practice? How to overcome this sort of fear and aversion? Well, I would start by asking myself the question, if I were you, of what is the goal? What is my goal with meditation practice? So you said in the past I had a daily meditation practice. So the question is, what is the goal? Is the goal just to kind of sit and get a little bit more relaxed, a little bit less stressed out? Well, yeah, it's true. That is kind of beneficial, especially at the very beginning. Well, at the very beginning, meditation is, kind of horrible for most people, very difficult sort of to do. Like, why am I sitting here? So boring. But then there's the sort of stage where you're like, oh, actually, I'm having a great, oh, this is so blissful and peaceful. I still remember first retreat I did. It was a Metta retreat. So I was all blissed out. It was incredible. It was great. I came out. I was such a hippie. It's like, oh, may everyone be happy. Yay, yay, yay. My friends who were not Buddhist or spiritual are like, oh, shut up. Everybody's suffering. Like, you're so annoying. Keep that to yourself, kind of thing. And then, after a while, it wasn't like that blissful anymore. All of a sudden, with meditation practice, yeah, great hatred and delusion were in full blown. And because I was sitting, not doing anything else, that's the only thing that was present. And that's actually when we're practicing. The practice begins there. That's what we call in terms of Buddhist practice. So we need to bring greed, hatred, and delusion to extinguishment. We're not going to bring greed, hatred, and delusion to an end just by having a great, oh, I'm, doing mindfulness-based stress reduction. Of course, there is a reduction of stress, but there's also a certain point an increase of stress. Shocking, isn't that? Like, how is it possible? I'm doing this to reduce the stress and there's like an increase of stress? Yes, of course, because you've been ignoring all this big pile of feces for beginningless time. So what we do is there's this big file of feces in front of us, and what we spend time doing is putting all these Febreze spray, like like deodorants over deodorants, and spraying it, and just covering it up with pretty cloths, and it works up to a certain degree, but realistically there's always a pile of feces. So the work then is to throw all these cloths, throw all these things away and face it. Face the feces. Dive into the feces. Smell the feces. Taste the feces. Learn what this feces is. And then you can get rid of it. And then the real peace and happiness ensues, comes. You're like, oh, I understand what this is. I understand what anger is. I understand what greed is. I understand what delusion is. I don't need to attach to these things. I can let them go instead of carrying them with me all the time and pretending they're not there and covering them up with all sorts of things. So yeah, you're facing the conditions of really understanding it's time to practice. It's time to actually really get into the thick of it. And at a certain point, it will be quite unpleasant. You're probably already in that stage where it's unpleasant. But you do what's hard to do. You do what is easy to do, and you do what is hard to do. So it's connected to actually the question that you asked earlier. We just practice. duty as practitioners is to practice. Doesn't matter the conditions. We're not trying to create a conditional practice. We're already like pursuing that in everything else. So we don't want meditation practice to be one of those conditional practices too. We're trying to familiarize ourselves with our minds to truly understand the workings of the mind. So yeah, if it's an aversive mind, you understand what an aversive mind is like. Learn, see, watch, and then throw it away. So this would be my advice, my thoughts. I don't know if the Venerables have any other.
I was going to recommend a somewhat different approach. Though I totally appreciate the feces talk. I also like to give feces talks from time to time. So I was just sitting here appreciating the feces, the stream of feces. But what I was actually thinking when I read your question or heard your question was just focus on practicing some joyful samadhi for a while. Forget about insight, forget about doing anything deep or complex, and just focus on cultivating a happy, joyful meditation practice through the development of samadhi. And then later on, when you've got some basis of stability and joyfulness, then you can resume doing insight practice. That was what I was going to recommend. But I'm also totally down with the diving into and devouring the pile of feces. That's also totally acceptable as a practice.
That's my approach.
I'm more of a samadhi practitioner. She's more of a vipassana practitioner.
That's right. Both are, valid approaches. And Michael asks, do you know any monasteries in the US that are accepting those that wish to go forth? Well, pretty much any monastery in the US accepts those that wish to go forth, but they need to meet them first. So it's not really a job application. There's not a particular resume and like deadlines and whatnot. But rather, if you're interested in going forth, visit monasteries. See if you find a community that, first understand what it's like to actually live as a monastic, because we can have all sorts of ideas of what it is to live in community, what it is to live in monasteries. And a lot of them are, most often than not, kind of fabrications of the mind. We tend to mythologize it and think that it's like this blissful, great thing that we're on top of a mountain in blissful meditation all the time. Well, actually, it's getting back to the feces. It's well, we do that work too. Actually, both literally, scrub toilets a lot in monasteries. So that might be something that in theory sounds good, but then in practicality, not really that much. But first go to monasteries, meet the community, see what monastic practice is all about, and then ask, share your aspirations to go forth and see if it's a good fit. And James asks, desire is the cause of suffering, but there is wholesome desires, correct? For example, the desire for enlightenment, the desire to help others. Bhante Sumana?
No, there's no wholesome desires. It's useful here to know the Pali. So tanha, craving, thirst, actually, is the word that's used. And I've never really liked desire as a translation for that, because in English you lose the meaning. And then, so their question, for example, of wholesome desires arises. But in my mind, what I'm hearing when you say that is wholesome thirst, wholesome fever. So that's why I say no. Because craving, desire, thirst as the cause of suffering is the mind state that says, I must get this in order to be happy. And when you start off from that point, you've already lost the battle. You've already created conditions that will never be able to be satisfied. So that's why they're not wholesome. That sort of craving, that sort of need for something. So you might have, say, a craving for a promotion. I must get this promotion or else I will not be happy. And you don't get the promotion. So, well, okay, I'm unhappy. Or you get the promotion and you realize it's not quite what you wanted or had in mind. And so you're unhappy anyway. Much better to let go of any sort of thirst or craving and to actually just do what brings benefit. And whether you get a promotion or don't get a promotion, it doesn't matter. Whether people like you or don't like you at work, it doesn't matter. Whether you're rich or poor, it doesn't matter. And in that sense, letting go, it always comes back to letting go in some ways, is a much freer place to be. So it doesn't mean that you give up wanting to do anything in the world, but rather you let go of sticking sort of a post in the ground, saying this is what I need in order to be happy. But rather, you do what brings benefit to you and others. You do what brightens the mind, what brings joy to the heart. And you realize that the pleasure or happiness or contentment that's arising from that is not because you're getting what you want, but rather because you're letting go of wanting things in the first place. And over time, you start to cultivate the ability to be content regardless of conditions. Unconditional happiness, unconditional love. And that's better than always having this mind of hunger, actually, a mind of always needing things to be one way or another. So you can want to, do well in your job, you can want to be recognized, you can want to be loved, you can want to travel the world, do whatever it is that you want to do. But knowing that when you get those things, they may not necessarily make you happy. And that's okay. But rather you're finding joy, contentment, and peace in actually not needing anything at all.
Right. Thanks, Bante. And James says to Bante Sudasum, incredible, Bante. Follow-up question then is, there any sutta that describes perceiving the cessation of dukkha?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So as you read through the Pali Canon cover to cover, you'll come across plenty. So just continue with your practice of reading through all the suttas, and you'll find a number of examples for yourself. And
James also asked, how is Stan? Well, Stan is doing significantly better. Sadhu, 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 anumadana for your concern for his well-being and for supporting him. So he's currently recovering, and he has to do what's it called? The
ultrasound.
Ultrasound, yes, on January 8th. So hopefully that will give us a few answers. And now he's currently on 3 different types of medicines. So hopefully they will work and he'll get in better health. But his appetite is really strong. So that has not changed. He will go through distress, but he will always remember when it's time to eat, which is basically all the time he has an opportunity. One of the medicines says that it decreases the appetite. And I was like, well, apparently not with Stan. All right. And Melinda, good to see you. Happy New Year to you as well. And Kauser friend says, thank you, Aya. That was a great answer. And thank you, Bante. It seems like I'll have to figure out which of these ways is right for me. Vipassana.
Both.
That's true. But dive into that. I think you're ready. Ishan says, I'm thinking of using social media to provide educational content, but somewhere I feel that it creates a lot of dilemma and influences people. Further down the line, it can add to the constant pressure to create content. How would you recommend using it as a tool and not becoming unwholesome for me? Basically, I would say my question is how do I get rid of the trap of social media? Please share some tips. Thank you for sharing the Dhamma and Happy New Year. Well, I have a very simple tip. Self-control, which is both sort of something that you can practice, but also an incredible app that I have downloaded on all the devices that I use. A self-control app. It's a great app, very simple, where you can block all the websites that you want for the time that you want, and it's irreversible. So there is no turning back. So you can do it, which is basically, I will be doing actually also for this retreat that we're about to enter. I'm just going to remove it. So it doesn't matter what happens. There is no turning back. So you can do it, you can plan it for time frames. So you can say only from this time to this time, I'll have that a period of time where I can go on social media and do that type of work. Or you can block it for entire periods of time. Or there can be the opposite. You can have a white list of things that it blocks everything except for the things that you tell them not to do. Hence, it's called self-control. It's basically self-control, but with some help, some technological help. So that fundamentally creates the conditions in order for us to train our mind and keep with the intention. So the intention of what you said, providing educational content that influences people, hopefully for in a wholesome direction. So recollecting, right? If you have like a sort of wall in front of wherever you work, write the intention for which you're pursuing this project, and always recollect it. So whenever you then get in all sorts of anxieties or whatever comes up by using these types of technology, which by the way, don't feel, you're actually pretty good at describing it as a trap. It is designed to work with the mind in that way. So any person who will start using these tools can get somewhat addicted if they're not skillful or mindful about it. So nothing to feel ashamed of or unique about. They're designed to be that way, but they're also powerful tools, as you've mentioned. So there's a way that actually one can use them to make some really good things in this world. So self-control. And James says, happy to hear Stan is eating. Please let us know how the ultrasound goes. Yes, we will do. Sadhu. And Gita says, Bantes and Aya. Bantes and Aya. When does your retreat start and end? Will there be sutta studies same as our current schedule? Yes, so our retreat starts tomorrow morning. Well, actually, tomorrow is the silent day before we start the retreat. So tomorrow we're just relaxing because we've been working like crazy. So technically it starts on Sunday morning. So in 30 hours or so. And each week there will be a monastic who will be sharing the Dhamma. So yes, there will always be sutta study in the morning and Dhamma talk in the evening and monk chat on Friday evening. It's just that there will only be one monastic at a time because all the rest of the community will be on retreat. So we'll still be present, but in a slightly different number. All right, so I don't see any other questions. You didn't throw there. I see lots of numbers on the top of the screen.
24 people and no questions.
So maybe, there you go. Hello, BDW. Welcome. Happy New Year. So BDW says, so there are moments when I have supernormal capacity. How might I increase this faculty? Bhante Sudaso.
Well, you could start by describing what you mean by supernormal capacity, and then we could talk further about it, because that could mean quite a number of different things. So maybe if you could clarify what you mean, then we'll be able to give a useful answer.
Mm-hmm. And Gita says, thank you. May your retreat be most fruitful. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Maybe so. And let's see if anything else shows up. As we said at the beginning of our meeting, monk chat is not offered by us, but it's offered by you. So we need questions in order to answer them. So any questions you have on Buddha Dhamma Sangha, or just being a monk, this is the avenue, the place where to bring it. So every Friday you have this opportunity to ask. And BDW says, Happy New Year. So for in this case, there are moments when I know what will happen before it happens, like seeing the future.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So that's not what Buddhism is for. So in the course of Buddhist practice, you may notice various kinds of supernormal abilities developing. Psychic powers, divination, extrasensory perceptions of various kinds that can happen as a side effect of Buddhist practice, but it's not normally something that we intentionally develop because it's not something which is directly conducive to enlightenment. So the focus of Buddhist practice is on developing morality, concentration, and wisdom. And in the process of doing so, and especially in the process of developing samadhi, you sometimes will notice these other abilities manifesting on their own. But don't get involved in them. Don't get distracted by them. They're not important. They're just side effects. So don't focus on it. Don't make it your goal or your priority. Keep in mind that your priority is to understand the Four Noble Truths. Your priority is to cultivate compassion. Your priority is to free the mind of its defilements. That's your priority. If you want to play around with supernormal powers, there's plenty of people in the world who teach that, but it's not conducive to enlightenment. It's not opposed to enlightenment, but it's not conducive to it either. So I don't talk about such things. I don't teach such things.
BDW says, morality, concentration, wisdom. Perfect. Thank you for this advice. And Key says, hello, I have no questions, but just wanted to wish you all a happy, peaceful, and secure new year and happy retreat. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Good to see you, Key, online. Hope everything is well in Australia. And say hello to our also venerable friends, Bhante Sujato and Bhante Akaliko. Much metta. I know you see them on regular places, and Sin and all our other friends in Tina in Australia. And Zen. Too many to list all at once. And Kaos, our friend, says, are there still arhants in the world? Bhante Sumano?
Wherever there are people practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, there are arhants. That's it.
All right, that's very Zen answer.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
It's just a sheer numbers thing. You've got like 500 million Buddhists in the world. Odds are pretty good that at least a handful of them have attained enlightenment. Yeah, just do the math. the odds are definitely in favor of arhants in the world.
All right. And Tran says, lately I have been feeling a sense of sadness or dissatisfaction that could be due to a variety of reasons. Messy house, being inside a house for too long. I wonder if what meditation practice might help.
Yes, definitely. It will help.
I think she says, if what meditation.
Well, first off, I'd just like to point out, you said a messy house. Well, then if you already know that having a messy house puts you in a bad mood, then clean your house. That's a great start. So also just looking like, what are you doing that's making yourself unhappy, and maybe change that. But as far as dealing with depression and so on, one of the most powerful methods for dealing with that is metta and karuna. So loving kindness and compassion. They're such uplifting and joyful meditation practices. They tend to cut through depression very easily. And samadhi, of course, but I recommend samadhi for everything.
And Mary says, I have been having some very bad dreams lately. Is there a Buddhist way to prevent this? I try to meditate before bed. Any sutta or techniques to help with this problem?
Metta meditation, loving kindness meditation. The Buddha actually says, literally, that cultivating metta helps one have good dreams, or at least not have bad dreams. So oftentimes, though, nightmares or bad dreams, they're not the result of anything that we've done, or at least that we remember doing. It can be the results of past karma, of which we have a huge store. So on one hand, actually, one thing that can help with that, when you wake up from a bad dream, is not to beat yourself up over it, actually. It's just be like, oh, that was really unpleasant. But that's how life is sometimes. And then cultivating metta for yourself, for others, cultivating compassion as well, helps to sort of lessen the sting of a bad dream. And the more you do that, just throughout the day, having a peaceful, happy, joyful, light mind, is the more that you realize that the bad dreams, even the bad reactions to a bad dream, start to dissipate. And then eventually you might have a bad dream, but when you wake up, you don't even remember it anymore. You just have the physical feeling of tension. And then eventually the bad dreams also stop. But I would say it sounds like you're looking for something that will for certain stop your nightmares. And kind of like what I was saying to the question before, don't make this a condition for your happiness, because it's possible that you'll have nightmares for the next 10 years. And if you already decided that if I have nightmares every night, then I just can't live like this, then you won't be able to live like this. But if you cultivate a mind that's like, well, if bad dreams happen, then they happen. I don't have to be destroyed by this. It's always nice to have good dreams, or maybe no dreams. But if the occasional bad dream comes, or the not so occasional bad dream, then we just deal with it like anything else. And deal with it with a gentle heart, a gentle mind, not beating ourselves up and not feeling bad that this is happening to us.
Nightmares often also highlight where our fears are. And fear is always a product of delusion. So you can also see a nightmare as a gift to you, because it's shown you where there's still some fear, some delusion, some craving, some aversion in the mind. So it's then something to work on. So what is it? Fear of being attacked, fear of being lost, fear of being sick, whatever the nightmare is, it's showing you where you still need to develop equanimity. So then that's something you can focus on in your practice, is developing equanimity towards whatever that fear is.
Great. Thank you, Bantes. And Ki says, Bante Akaliko and some friends came over to my place yesterday and we watched one of Bante Sumano's videos and had a discussion of it.
Cute.
Oh,
Now I
lovely.
feel self-conscious.
No, it's good stuff. And Ki says, we also went to a Dana branch with Bante Sujato yesterday. He has a new translation of the Metta Sutta. Oh, wonderful. We're going to check it out. Oh, we miss you all in Australia. But we rejoice in your happy conditions now that it's warm and lovely. And we just saw actually, I think right before this live stream, a Bante Akaliko's picture in this beautiful space. I don't know where it was, but it was lovely. I think he was out of a meditation retreat or something. I don't know.
Australian summer.
Yeah, much mudita. And Helena says, hello, happy new year. I have recently been using a lot of this Headspace meditation phone app. I loved it mainly for winding down the mind, especially for sleep. From our meditation, it's more about being aware of ourselves, our surroundings. I was curious to know what your thoughts are on phone apps such as these.
Sure. I've used Headspace before. I think it's might have been at the very beginning of my Buddhist practice. And I was commuting a lot to work in New York City. So it was actually very helpful for me because I could just set it and be on the train or walking. There's like walking meditation instructions and everything. So they have guided meditations that a lot of people find helpful. I would say if it's working for you, then keep using it. You might find that after some time you won't need it anymore, but if it's bringing benefit, then yeah, sounds great.
Great. And Gita says, Bhante Sudha, the four immeasurable vows you spoke of was truly wonderful. Thank you. And Tran says, I also want to follow Gita's comment about the vows talk. It was very uplifting. Great. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, and Melinda says, I call on my Lord Buddha when I have a bad dream. It helps 100% of the time. Oh, that is so sweet.
Actually, there's a few places in the suttas where the Buddha says that one of the remedies for fear is to recollect the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. One of the more well-known examples is the Dajaga Sutta, which in many monasteries is commonly chanted.
Great. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, actually. That's why it helps 100% of the time. We have a 5-star review from Melinda. And Patricia, I think Patricia, why? Yeah, Patricia,
Yeah.
Good to see you. Happy New Year. I wish I could attend the retreat, but I'm not financially stable and I need to work and support my mother. I feel sad because of this. How can I overcome this feeling? Bhante?
Well, first off, recognize that you have the wonderful opportunity to take care of your mother. Many people, their mothers have already passed away and they no longer have the opportunity. So taking care of your mother is a wonderful, meritorious activity. So see it as your practice. See it as something which you can do to cultivate a mind of kindness and thoughtfulness and consideration. So really delight in it. Delight in the opportunity to look after your mother. And practice as much as you can. So besides the development of thoughtfulness and compassion and gratitude and so on that I just spoke about, also make sure to set aside plenty of time for meditation practice and study. In fact, I recommend making a schedule for yourself and sticking to it. Of course, it can be more difficult by yourself, but if you make the schedule and you keep resolving to stick to it, then it will help give you some structure. Make sure your practice stays strong. And then later on, when you do have the opportunity to come to the monastery and spend some time here, then of course we'll be happy to have you.
Great. Thank you, Bante. And Michael says, earlier you answered my question on going forth. I have another question. Is your monastery offering retreats, ordination? I'm not trying to marry before the first date, but I'm eagerly searching. Well, we're about to enter 2-month retreat here at Empty Cloud. But until the pandemic is over to a certain degree or the other, for the lack of better words, I don't know if it will ever be over, but I mean, of course it will be over, but as in, we don't know exactly how, when, the process. So we don't know exactly how retreats are going to be offered in the foreseeable future. Eventually they will be offered again, but the monastery is shut down. So we do accept visitors, but on specific conditions. So you're welcome to send us an email in the spring, and then the community can read your request, and we can have a discussion here, and based on the circumstances, because everything is changing we're already a disorganized religion, hence a disorganized organization, but now with an unpredictable pandemic, I don't know what's going to happen from here to March. So be in touch in March, and we'll take it from there. And Lloyd says, I often feel guilt that I'm not doing more to alleviate suffering in the world, but I also feel that I could never do enough. Can you speak to this feeling?
So it says something before that.
Ali.
Ali.
It's Ali.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So another person asking.
Oh, Ali is asking that. Okay, yes. Were you interested in that?
I mean, I could answer the question, but I've been speaking a lot, so I would let somebody else answer it if they prefer to.
Okay. There's a couple of things that came to mind. But one thing, the second part of what you said is right. You'll never be able to do enough. And so recognizing that actually brings a lot of relief. No matter what you do, it'll never be enough. And see how that feels. And the other part is really look at that feeling of guilt that's coming up. Why do you feel that you need to be doing something in the world? Why do you feel like you need to be doing anything at all, actually? Why is it not good enough to be raising a child, to be in a meaningful relationship, to be learning the Dhamma and practicing? Why is that not enough? Why aren't you enough? And even if you weren't doing all of those things, actually, if you were living at home in your parents' basement, not paying any bills, would you feel guilty? Why? So where are these feelings of self-worth, of responsibility, of obligation coming from? Is it something your parents said, siblings, society? Is it something you're imposing on yourself? And once you start exploring this and start realizing what the answer is, then I think you'll start understanding these feelings a bit better. So I know in my case, for example, I've actually had similar reflections. I've often felt guilty, less more recently since I've ordained, but when I was a layperson, I've often felt extremely guilty that I wasn't doing everything that I could to make the people in my life happy, to make the world a better place, to be the best, to always be on 100%, to be perfect. It was perfectionism. And it took a lot to actually see that that was even taking place. And one day a friend pulled me aside and was like, why do you feel like you have to do all these things in order to be loved? I was like, what? That's not why I'm doing all these things. But actually it was, because I'd grown up believing, because it was told to me, that if I wasn't perfect, then I wasn't worthy of acceptance or love or whatever existence. And of course, as a Black person, there's also that sort of societal pressure to always be the best. The best is never good enough, but worse than best is not good at all. And so there's all of these pressures coming from all around that just make us feel like simply existing is not enough. And I would really challenge that. It is enough to simply exist. It's enough to exist and not do anything. It's good enough to just receive, actually. To receive love from others, to receive kindness from others, to receive gifts. And to not do anything in return, to not do anything to deserve it. So we have these ideas of we deserve this, and I owe that person that, and I should be doing this, and I need to do this. It's always this transactional thing. But I found, at least for myself, that when I start to take away that tit for tat mindset, if I do this, then I'll be valued. If I do this, then I'll be loved. If I do this, then I'll get good karma. Once I let all of that go, then it frees up so much space for unconditional giving, for unconditional receiving, for unconditional love. Then I don't have to be the best at anything at all to be worthy. And in the same way, other people don't have to be the best. I can be kind to someone just for the sake of being kind to them, even if they're horrible human beings. And I can receive love and kindness, even if I'm not the best, even if I'm a horrible human being. And in this way, you start to break down this idea that you have to do something to deserve happiness. You don't have to do anything at all. And something curious and counterintuitive happens. And it's that you find that actually you end up being able to do more to help the world when you don't have this pressure just pushing you down, grinding you into the ground, constantly berating yourself. You have all this energy that radiates in every direction. And you end up doing so much good for people. Whereas before you were no good at all, or at least only good in a limited way. So I'd really reflect on this state of mind. And I think that you'll be able to find the answer within yourself.
Thank you, Bante. I just want to add something that Bante Ji actually shared with me when I visited Bhavana Society. It's related but unrelated in the way that Bante Ji is this, he's not 93 years old, something like that. And well, he's the abbot of a monastery. He is very famous, so he has constantly people who go to the monastery and visit him, constantly people writing to him, asking Dhamma questions, like lots of like people kind of going to him and wanting quote unquote things for him. And I remember going there and at a certain point asking, Bante, how are you not overwhelmed by all of this? The image that kind of came up to my mind was actually a Christian image of Jesus when he is, I was obsessed with Jesus Christ Superstar. So I'm thinking in particular in a scene in the musical and film where Jesus is like overwhelmed by all these lepers that are going to him asking to be cured. Cure me, Jesus. Touch me, Jesus. And he starts touching each one of them. And then he's overwhelmed. Even Jesus is overwhelmed, like by this endless pool of suffering. So I was thinking, wow, it's kind of like similar in the way that we all come here to Bhanteji with all this suffering, myself included, looking for questions and always being there. Bhanteji, how can I do this? Bhanteji, how can I do this? And so I asked him, Bhante, how can you preserve your peace of mind? Because he's always like, he's so incredibly inspiring. You see him, doesn't matter, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever he appears, he's always it's just like a statue of the Buddha. Like, it's incredible. And what he shared was fundamentally the definition. He didn't phrase it this way, actually. This is from the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, but it's basically the same concept. So engaged Buddhism, that we often think of engaged Buddhism being this thing that we have to kind of kill ourselves to do and put all this, becomes so much effort, but rather engaged in the present moment. So just taking every single thing that happens in every moment as it comes, without thinking in the past, without thinking in the future, like what's coming up, how many people are after the person that you're currently talking to, or how many duties you have in the monastery, but rather also connected to the self-control app. Dedicating, understanding, creating sort of boundaries and saying, well, now I can dedicate 2 hours, 3 hours to whoever comes to the monastery. So he'll dedicate that amount of time and just engage with the present moment, what is happening. Then he'll disappear for whatever time. And work on themselves. So always creating this balance too of 360-degree giving to others and giving to ourselves. There's nothing that is selfish. So what Bhante Sumana was saying, like, we tend to have these wrong views, that we don't deserve things, that we'd better work for it. So in the same way, like, we also don't deserve going on meditation retreats. We don't deserve creating room for our personal practice. Some of my relatives who I spoke to today, actually, who are not Buddhist, they were presenting me with these ideas, how I was very selfish to disappear for 2 months. that is not something wholesome. And so when these things are presented, actually, there can be some guilt that arises that, oh, yeah, I should be doing X, Y, and Z instead. But in reality, if we actually just focus on doing X, Y, and Z without working on ourselves, we will be doing X, perhaps, definitely not Y and Z, and poorly. So we need to, that's why it's full circle, this practice. It's always when, being the recipients of generosity is a form of giving. And then there's time to give as well, and create and allow others to be the recipients of generosity. So allow them to give to us, but without putting it on an Excel sheet, but rather really just creating this balance of always seeing, where is the mind? What is the mind like? So if there's guilt in the mind, if there's all these unwholesome, so giving has to be a delightful practice. When you go to a monastery, for example, and you see born Buddhists giving things to the Sangha, they're not depressed. They're not like, oh my God, I feel so guilty. There's so many other monks that I didn't go to today. Like, just in the state of New Jersey. That's horrible. I'm only feeding 3 monks or 5 monks. I could feed like so many other monks. Or I don't deserve to eat after the monks go. Actually, I should leave it for them. Yeah, that sounds atrocious. Who would ever go to a monastery to do that? Sounds brutal, like torture. No, people come. Doesn't matter how old they are, they're all delighting in generosity. It's delightful. Helping others is beautiful. Helping in any way, shape, and form, when done skillfully, it brightens up the mind. It's an incredible practice. So when unwholesome mind states arise in the mind, that means we're not giving. That means we're going about it with craving rather than with metta or compassion, or with equanimity, for sure. So we are adding suffering to the world. We're like, oh, there's so much suffering. There's nothing that I can do. So let me like add this suffering. Let me get this like other pile of suffering on it, on this piece of cake. That's not skillful, is it? So instead, that's why it's so helpful, actually, what Bhante Sudaza was talking about yesterday in terms of the vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. I like to add all at the end of that. Instead of beings are numberless, I vow to save them all. And taking that vow, yeah, I'll do it. It doesn't matter. It's difficult to do. I'll do it. Doesn't matter. But the process is important, not the, we're so goal oriented. Anything, when we see the mind, when we're doing walking meditation, it was so frustrating at the very beginning because you're not going anywhere. And we're used to, like, whenever we're walking, we're going at least from one door to one door. We're going somewhere from here to the fridge to accomplish something. With walking meditation, you're not accomplishing anything. You're not even accomplishing getting fit. Sometimes I remember I was like, my mind was getting frustrated. I was like, I need to like move the body, and actually doing this slow walking, it's not going to do anything. Like, it's so frustrating. Why do I go back and forth like a crazy person, like a zombie, like an idiot? Like, who does that? At least when you're sitting, there's like a sort of purpose, maybe. You know, we can get into these like weird thinkings, but that's a great opportunity to see how perverse our mind is. Of always, as Bhante Suvana was saying, there is exchange mentality. I'm doing this in order to achieve that. Even something so banal as walking. You need to achieve something with walking. But bam, we let go of that. Yeah, beings are numberless. I'm not going to save them all, but I'm going to save them all. Yes, I'm going to do it. So doesn't matter if we are able to do it or we're not able to do it, which, by the way, as soon as we attain awakening, we're actually able to do it. That's so bizarre. It's Buddhism, so crazy. We thought it was so rational, but in reality, it's so irrational. But so we need to like remove all of this stuff, throw it out. Guilt is not yours. Whatever is not yours, abandon it. It's not useful. And delight in giving, delight in helping, delight in caring. Delight. Nurture that. Yes, that's beautiful. So that's what comes to mind. And Kaiser Friend says, how do you deal with legs falling asleep when sitting cross-legged? Is this something that goes away over time? Is there a special way of sitting that prevents it? Actually, I have to respond to this because this was something that tortured me at the very beginning of practice. And Bhante Sudaza has an incredible flexible body. I remember I used to ask him, and he was like, you just sit like this, cross-leg. Actually, he would go, but I have a different body. Mine is more stiff, so it doesn't automatically go into posture. So it would normally like automatically fall asleep. So it's both true that actually goes away over time, but at the same time, also it depends on how we're sitting on the cushion. And actually, pain is something that doesn't go away over time, but it lessens its momentum over time. So it becomes bearable instead of unbearable. But whenever the legs fall asleep, it's actually because we're pushing the nerve that I don't remember what kind of name it has, but there's this fun nerve that if we sit on the cushion as if it were a chair, so fully on, we're going to press it, and that automatically will numb the leg. But if you sit on the cushion like you were about to fall off the cushion, counterintuitive also, that one. You're like, why would I go on the tip of the cushion? Rather, you put yourself on the cushion and the legs just don't fall asleep because you're not pressing that nerve. Hence, all you will experience in meditation is pain.
But you'll develop equanimity, and then the pain ceases to be a problem.
Exactly.
On the subject of legs falling asleep, another thing that can make a difference is using a softer cushion, or sometimes a firmer cushion, but generally speaking, a softer cushion helps quite a bit. And when you sit down to meditate, pay very close attention to the sensations in the area of your upper thighs and your tailbone. And notice if there's any odd sensations. And then later on, if your legs fall asleep in a few minutes, you might make the connection that your legs were giving you an advance warning. Those odd sensations in the first couple minutes were an advance warning that you weren't sitting correctly. Your body tells you, if the legs are going to fall asleep, your body will give you plenty of advance warning. And if you pay attention, then you'll learn what that signal is. There's a specific sensation which doesn't mean anything other than your legs are going to fall asleep in a few minutes. If you pay attention, you'll learn what that sensation is.
Thank you, Bhante. And Patricia also says, thank you, Bhante. I tried hard to study by myself, but I guess I don't have the discipline. And Gita says, with the full frustration to Bhikkhuni Soma, Bhante Suddhasa and Bhante Sumana for tirelessly sharing the Dhamma over the past months. May we all awaken to the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Oh, sadhu. And we rejoice in your incredible practice, Gita, of constantly showing up to practice with us as well as with other monastics, we know. So it's, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Tommy is asking, why do you chant in Pali instead of English? Bhante Sudaso?
Well, we do sometimes chant in English, though that's not my preference. I would rather just chant in Pali. I also like chanting in Chinese, but I'm the only one here, so that happens very rarely. So Pali, it's very close to what the Buddha spoke, and the Pali chanting is very ancient, so somewhere between 1500 to 2500 years old, depending on which historian you like to listen to. And it gives one a sense of a deep connection to an ancient tradition. And also it preserves the meaning. So any translation is always insufficient. If you really want to get the meaning of something, then you want to be using the oldest language possible. So for that reason, it's good to preserve the Pali, because again, any translation always blurs the meaning at best and often distorts the meaning. So it's very valuable to chant in Pali. Also, to be honest, many of the Pali chants are really beautiful. The Buddha had a poetic flair with his speech, and that comes through when you recite Pali out loud.
Yeah, I agree. It's very beautiful to chant in Pali. Also, you can go pretty much in every Theravada speaking country, and you'll know the chanting. You'll fit right in. It's wonderful. When we were in Thailand, even though we don't speak Thai, we could follow along. It's great.
Except when they chanted in Thai.
Exactly. Yeah, when they chanted in Thai, we couldn't. But we got the Pali. And speaking of Thailand, hello, Art, that I believe you're watching from Thailand. Good to see you. Happy New Year. Well, happy Western New Year, because I think in Thailand they have the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Bhavani is saying, Namaste. If I am conscious when I am dying, should I think about Nibbana so that my rebirth will be helpful to attain Nibbana, or should I keep my mind empty? He doesn't want to.
Well, there's a couple approaches. So for example, in Pure Land Buddhism, they say that at the time of death, you should focus your mind on Amitabha Buddha, so that you'll be reborn in the presence of Amitabha Buddha. And so that's the teaching in the Pure Land schools. In some schools of Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about projecting your consciousness. So determining your next rebirth and projecting your consciousness to the desired form of rebirth. And commonly another practice that you'll be told is just to pay attention to the impermanence of all physical and mental constructs and recognize that they are impersonal and not self. So these are all valid ways of practicing. So if you are focused on a positive rebirth, then make sure the aspiration is to be reborn in a place that's conducive to Dharma practice, and optimally a place that has a living Samma Sambuddha. Again, that's the point of Pure Land practice. The point of Pure Land practice is, if I don't get enlightened in this life, I want to have the perfect conditions in my next life. But if you want to try to attain enlightenment at the time of death, which many teachers have said that it's actually the ideal circumstance. If your wisdom is sharp and your samadhi is strong, then at the time of death, it's possible to attain awakening. Because it's so undeniably obvious that body and mind are impermanent when they're dying. So you can do that. Practice the recognition of impermanence and not self as the body and mind start to move towards death. These are all valid ways of practicing.
Great, thank you, Bhante. And after saying at the temples here, in Thailand, we chant in Pali and English together. Oh, we have not been to one single temple where there was chanting in English. Interesting. They were always doing it in Pali. I wonder if
Pali
it's
and Thai.
Yeah, in Pali and Thai. I wonder if it's what Panana Chak is talking in Ghost Joe. But that's good to know. And Happy New Year, thank you. And we have Thai New Year in April. Oh, wonderful.
Interesting. So that's
great.
not the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
It's a different time. So actually that's great. That means you get to celebrate New Year 3 times.
Yes.
So you get January, February, and April. That's lovely.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it looks like it's all for tonight, for January 1st. Thank you all for coming tonight to ask all these interesting questions. And we will be starting our retreat very soon. So you will find Bhante Sudazo actually for the next 2 weeks, so who will be leading both sutta study and evening meditation and Dhamma discussion. Actually, the topic next week will be Samadhi, and the week after that, Vipassana. So for Carlos, our friend, you get both Samadhi and Vipassana 1 week after the other. And then after that, all the Bhante Sudazo you won't see until March, but all the rest of us will be taking turns. So you'll be seeing us at a certain point. All right. So thank you, friends. Oh, Gita says that at Mahamevna Buddhist monasteries, they chant in English and Pali. Very interesting. Maybe we can do a list of English and Pali monasteries. All right. Thank you all for the wishes for the retreat. We wish you a happy New Year. May you all attain blissful enlightenment. And we can end with three sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.